So the question is, does Kobbie Mainoo have a future in Amorim's 3-4-3? Well, at present with the current setup you'd have to say no, but it definitely is feasible if Amorim is willing to evolve and adapt his system. See, Amorim's current system leaves Mainoo isolated and overworked out of possession, whilst not fully optimising the system to maximise his strengths in the build-up and in the middle third. But with some of the tactical alterations that I'm going to suggest later on in the video, I do think Mainoo could not only function in a midfield double pivot, but I think he could be crucial to improving United in specific areas that we are in desperate need of improvement in. So what's actually holding Mainoo back right now? Well, despite using the same 3-4-3 on paper, Ruben Amorim's defensive and pressing setups lack the structural discipline and the positional organisation of, say, Conte's 16-17 title-winning Chelsea side, or the more aggressive pressing but positional organisation that we see with Oliver Glasner's 3-4-3 at Crystal Palace. Out of possession, it seems like Amorim's system is caught between two ideas, and I think that's exactly where Kobbie Mainoo is struggling, and so that raises a few questions. Firstly, what are the specific tactical adjustments could Amorim make to improve his 3-4-3 from a defensive and pressing point of view? Secondly, would these be enough to allow Mainoo to not just play in, but also thrive in a two-man central midfield? And how could Amorim apply fluidity between possession shapes and also incorporate positional rotations in order to maximise Mainoo's value in the build-up phase, while simultaneously opening up spaces elsewhere for other players to exploit? But before I go any further, if you want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to jerseyfifa.co. They've got a variety of different current season and retro jerseys, including the new season jerseys for the 25-26 season. They sent me over the new Manchester United home shirt with Bruno Fernandes on the back, as well as this 06-07 white Manchester United away shirt with Ronaldo number 7 on the back, alongside this Zinedine Zidane Juventus shirt from the 1990s as well. If you use code ATLANTIS at checkout, you'll get a 10% discount, so I'll leave it linked in the description and in the comments section below. So in response to my tactical criticism of Amorim's system, a lot of people do like to point out, well, it's obviously not the system that's the issue, using Antonio Conte's Chelsea and Glasner's Crystal Palace as two examples of successful applications of the 3-4-3 as evidence. But what they're failing to understand is that these are not the exact same system, it's just the same formation used on paper, but with different strategies in different phases of play incorporated within it. An entire system cannot simply be boiled down to just an on-paper formation. See, whilst Conte's Chelsea back in 16-17 and Glasner's Palace last season both used a 3-4-3 or maybe a 5-2-3 out of possession, their pressing and defensive shapes represented very different ideas. Conte's Chelsea relied on trigger presses rather than constant pressure high up the pitch, not engaging the opposition as high in their defensive third, instead a lot of the time sitting deeper and waiting to engage them as they approach the middle third. From here, Costa, Hazard and Pedro curved their runs sitting narrow in the front three in order to cut the passing lane centrally and force the play wide, wherefrom in a more conservative pressing approach to what we see with Amorim's United, the wingbacks Victor Moses and Marcos Alonso would really only jump forward to apply pressure once spatial coverage was secured behind them, but also inside in central midfield, whilst the midfield double pivot of Kante and Matic was perfect, finding the right balance between hunting to win possession but also screening to cut passing lanes in behind. And so the result was a horizontally and vertically compact mid-block designed to compress space between the lines, force the opposition out into wider areas, and then only initiate a collective aggressive press when there was a specific trigger such as a square pass. Alternatively, Glasner's Palace's 3-4-3 functions in a different way. Glasner uses more of a man-to-man orientated aggressive press higher up the pitch, with the front three applying direct pressure but still remaining compact and narrow in their front three in order to cut off passing lanes through the centre. The wingbacks are a lot more aggressive when moving up the flank in order to apply pressure to the opposition's fullbacks when they receive the ball, while the back three are a lot more comfortable than Conte's Chelsea when stepping forward in order to squeeze the space in behind. Conte's style was a lot more passive in the 3-4-3, focusing on using their defensive shape to control the game even without the ball, whilst Oliver Glasner's is a lot more orchestrated chaos, looking to counter-press immediately to win the ball back in advanced zones and attack directly before the opposition can get back into position. Even with a reduced press and a more organised defensive setup than Amorim's United, there of course is still going to be situations where the double pivot do get exposed, which is why Glasner prefers athletic profiles in central midfield such as Jefferson Lerma, Decore, alongside Adam Walton, with the team also capable of dropping deeper when needed to sit in a narrow 5-4-1. Now Ruben Amorim's Manchester United sit awkwardly between the two. His press is certainly more aggressive and engages the opposition higher up the pitch than Conte's, but without the cohesion and defensive organisation of Glasner's, leaving the midfield double pivot to cover huge areas in the press, and frequently facing overloads in the centre of midfield in the middle third as well, which is further exacerbated by the back three not following as strict a man-to-man press as a midfield double pivot, and not being anywhere near as aggressive as they need to be to step up to cover the space in behind during the press. But also, without these elite level athletic profiles in central midfield, United's rest defence can be susceptible to quick counter-attacks, making them heavily dependent on counter-pressing in order to stop the opposition's counter-attacks after a turnover. The solution lies in combining Conte's compact discipline with Glasner's forward-stepping aggression. The man-to-man press has to be equally aggressive across the back three, the wing-backs, the midfield double pivot, as well as the front line leading the press, in order to make sure that the pressing shape doesn't become disjointed and stretched, and leaving the double pivot isolated in that massive amount of space in the centre. But where exactly does this leave Kobbie Mainoo? Well, for sure, restraining the press slightly, instructing the front three to engage slightly deeper, maybe 10 to 15 yards deeper, only engaging when the opposition reach the middle third, rather than racing to press as high as possible, which is therefore going to reduce the amount of accurately timed vertical sprints that Mainoo's going to have to make consistently throughout a game in order to avoid the space between the front and midfield lines becoming stretched. But reducing the intensity of the press would also provide more protection wide off and in behind Mainoo, with the back line now in closer proximity, with United able to transition the 5-3-2 shape into more of a 3-4-3, enabling the system to build the intensity of the press gradually rather than immediately, going through the gears rather than going straight from first to second all the way to sixth, as we currently see from United, which is the primary reason why we see such a disjointed press. Now yes, of course, this would make Amorim's press less intense, reducing the likelihood of winning the ball back high up the pitch, but it would deal with the spacing issues around the midfield double pivot, which in my opinion is a trade-off which is an absolute no-brainer, considering United's press isn't exactly resulting in a high volume of turnovers and subsequent direct attacks, creating high-value chances consistently. At this point in time, the press is clearly more of a defensive liability than it is as an offensive weapon. This greater defensive protection then enables you to use Mainoo in a deeper area in possession, where when compared to Casemiro and Agate, he is significantly more press resistant and comfortable when it comes to receiving the ball under immediate pressure, either with his back fully or partially to goal. I think the optimal setup is having Mainoo alongside Casemiro, with Bruno Fernandes then able to have his defensive responsibilities reduced, playing in a more advanced hybrid role in the front three, shifting between the right-sided half-space area between the lines, being given the freedom to roam into a deeper position alongside the midfield double pivot, enabling United to create central overloads themselves. And even out of possession, Bruno in this hybrid role could provide United's defensive shape in the middle third with greater positional fluidity and flexibility, just as we saw with Fulham, using a 5-3-2 which at times would resemble more of a 5-2-3, depending on Iwobi and King's positioning. However, in possession is where the big improvement would come, as having Mainoo and Bruno in the centre of midfield would substantially improve United's ability to progress the ball through the centre of the pitch, effective in the middle third as well as in the build-up phase, and that's because you're now able to utilise both Bruno and Mainoo deep and central, with both being United's best options when it comes to playing short and sharp 1 and 2 touch passes in congested areas, baiting and then playing around the pressure to then split the midfield with an incisive pass, or turning the pressing player and carrying the ball into the space behind the opposition's midfield line. In the defensive third during the build-up phase and during settled possession in the middle third, United need five-a-side type of players in those central zones in order to aid ball progression through those central congested areas, and Mainoo is exactly this, with this tactics board example showing how Mainoo can be used alongside greater positional fluidity and player rotations to drastically improve United in the build-up phase. So this is United's usual setup in this phase of play, with De Ligt, the central centre-back, sitting on the edge of the box, box, who may just be the least optimal player that United could have in this area, primarily because even elite level centre-backs in general aren't highly competent or comfortable when receiving the ball on the edge of their own box with their back to goal under immediate pressure from behind. I'm really not quite sure why Amorim insists on the central centre-back continuously being the player to not just initially push forward into this area, but actually hold the position, because it completely stifles United's ability to play out via shorter passing sequences through the centre, which usually just results in a low probability long direct ball into the forward line. See, Amorim can start with the initial exact same setup, he just needs to incorporate positional fluidity and rotations, with De Ligt starting here, but at the right time dropping deep to the right side of the goalkeeper, which will work to either open up a passing lane or drag the opposition's presser in front, away from that area that he's just vacated, as he looks to cut the passing lane from in front of De Ligt or apply pressure from behind him, which simultaneously allows Yoro to pull wider, turning the back three at the base of the possession system into a wider back four, giving United greater width to circulate the ball around the opposition's front and midfield line press. But crucially, De Ligt has now vacated this central area, allowing Mainoo to drop in and looking to receive a frontline splitting pass from the goalkeeper or one of the centre-backs, wherefrom he's going to be far more effective at playing out of these pressurised situations, either with a bounce pass inside to Casemiro, or outside to Dorgu, or a pass around the corner into Bruno or Cunha, or even just using a drop of a shoulder and a swivel, before then driving out the defensive third himself. This positional fluidity between possession shapes and the rotation between individual players makes it significantly harder for the opposition to consistently match up United's players, and putting their individual players in positional dilemmas about when to hold their position to keep the pressing shape compact, which in turn can open up space for someone like Ahmad or Bruno to move into as a free man, or to follow their movement, disrupting their pressing shape and opening up spaces around the box for United to then exploit with short, sharp passing sequences. So let me know if you agreed with my analysis in the comment section below, and if you want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to jerseyfever.co. You can use code Atlantis at checkout for a 10% discount. I'll leave a link in the description and in the comments section below.